Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for joining with the video of ethnography. Actually, this is my second recording because of what I felt to pick up the previous video. That's okay. Now, let's try to go to our business and then we have to recite Umul Kitab first, please. Okay, thank you. In 10 minutes, I would like to clarify, to present about the slides of the ethnography as one of the traditions in the qualitative research, especially for the language education in English. And we have to go to the aims of the ethnography. We move to this one that it aims in focusing on the cultural context of language use. How about the characteristics of ethnographic research? The first one is the contextual, that the research is carried out in the context in which the subject normally live and work. And then the second is unobtrusive. Here, the researcher avoids manipulating the phenomena under investigation. The third is longitudinal, that the research is relatively long term. The fourth is collaborative. Here, the research involves the participant of stakeholders other the researcher. How about the interpretive? Interpretive as the fifth characteristic. It deals with the researcher carries out interpretive analysis of the data. About the organic as the last characteristic, it deals with the interaction between questions and hypotheses and also data collection and interpretation. Now we move on to the reliability. Here there are two types. The first is the internal and then the second is the external. How about the internal reliability? It talks about the question to check whether or not that it having the threats in the ethnographic research or not. The first is, does the research utilize low inference descriptor? Does it employ more than one researcher and collaborator? Does the researcher invite peer examination or cross-site corroboration? Are the data mechanically recorded? Those are the questions dealing with the internal. Now we move on to the external reliability. Talking about the question, it deals with the first one is the status of the researcher made explicit. Does the researcher provide a detailed description of the context and conditions under which the research was carried out? Are the constructs and premises explicitly defined? Are the data collection and analysis methods presented in detail? After having the reliability, we move to the validity. The same one for the type, it is preceded by the internal with the question of is it likely that maturational changes occurring during the course of the research will affect outcomes? Is there bias in the selection of informants? Is the growth or attrition of informants over time likely to affect outcomes? Have alternative explanation for phenomena been rigorously examined and excluded? Moving to the external validity, we have the question for the first one. Are some phenomena unique to a particular group or site and therefore non-comparable? Are outcomes due to or in part to the presence of the researcher? Are cross-group comparisons invalidated by unique historical experiences of particular groups? The last question dealing with the external validity is to what extent are abstract terms and constructs shared across different groups and research sites? Now have the principles of ethnographic talking about the formulating a research problem, it goes to the central importance giving to contrast. The nature of goals, the data, later hypothesis. The last principle says the results application, that it has comparability and translatability. Moving to the examples of ethnographic, we have here 1983 and then Cauldron and Research 1986. About the research question itself, for the first study, what are the effects of home and community environments on the learning of those language structures and functions which are needed to succeed at school and at work? And then for the second study, what is the effect on second language learners' comprehension of lectures, of the use of discourse markers, which indicate overall organization and links between sentences within the lecture? About subject, for the first study, as children belonging to two rural working class communities in US, and then the second study, two groups of pre-university and university ESL students. The method as the third point, for the first study, naturalistic and contextualized data collection. For the second study, dealing with the experiment. Talking about the type of data, we have the interview, footnote, transcripts of child-adult and also adult-child interaction, also the environmental language. Those belong to the first study. Meanwhile, for the second study, dealing with the scores on clues, multiple choice, and true voltaires. The analysis type in the first study had the interpretative and discursive, and then the second study had the correlation study and also uncover as the statistical item. After knowing the comparison between two studies here, we move on to the real example of article having the topic of the ethnographic study entitled English Learning Model and Ethnography Study. You may try to googling, visit the web please, it gets Sempena English Education Journal. And then the writers, Abidin and Rahmat in 2020. Now, meanwhile, we have to read in the detail, about the abstract. Later, we get the point. Oh, that the main idea of this kind of research dealing with what we can find it in the keywords, study ethnography, English learning, and learning model. The authors provided three keywords in the abstract. Now let's move on to the method. Here there are three parts, but I think that the last part is talking about the data analysis. These research, used spread list 1980 as the model analysis technique, namely the first domain analysis, taxonomic analysis, componential analysis, and team analysis. Of course, this study applied a qualitative approach with ethnographic methods. The purpose of the research is to obtain accurate data so as to gain an in-depth understanding of English language learning model at private madrasah aliyah Jemalah Amal. Talking about the data source, they were excavated from 3 points. The first is events, and then the second of all is the informant, and then the last is document. The instrument in the data collection was the researchers themselves using three aspects here. Those were observation instruments, interview guidelines, and document. Dealing with the informant, there were headmaster, deputy curriculum division, English teacher, and some students of class 11 who were selected based on teachers' instruction. With the document, there were written information relating to the process of implementing English learning in the classroom. For the events, the English language education learning model in class class 11, A, B, and C. So here there are three classes. Okay, I think that's all for the example of the ethnographic study presented in the article. See you next time. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.